Beginning with Reason 5, you can now sample from within Reason. That means you're no longer confined to samples and audio files in refills or on your disk or ones that you've downloaded or purchased. You can actually create your own samples right within the Reason application. I'm going to show you how to do this in this video and the next. To start with, there are 4 devices that support sampling. The NN19 does, the NNXT does, ReDrum does on each of its 10 channels, and the Kong does, both from the detail pad window and from within the NN Nano drum module. Now there's one other way to sample, and that is through the tool window. Remember, press F8 to get the tool window, and on the last tab you have the sampling information. Here are all the samples that are already being used in devices you've loaded, and down at the bottom is a sample button, so you can sample independent from any one of the devices in Reason, and then decide what you're going to do with that sample later. So how do we sample? Well, the key is this hardware interface. That's where we determine what is going to feed our sampling input, which are the first 2 inputs in our hardware interface. Right now they're keyed from ports 1 and 2 of my audio interface, but I only have a mono microphone, so I'm going to go from my mono audio input, channel 1, to my sampling input. And now we should hear my mic.
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
So you can see the meters, everything is working correctly. I have a monitoring area so I can hear what I'm sampling. That's useful when I'm in playback mode, for example. And then I have a level for my monitor. It's always a good idea to check for clipping, and the big meter can be helpful with that. So I'm getting signal, my levels are correct. Now it's time to sample. Let me clear out some of these devices. We're going to sample within the ReDrum. Now you sample by pressing the little audio file icon, and there are 2 ways to do it. The first is you press it and then you press stop when you're done.
Bass drum.
That's all there is to it. Now let's see if that sample actually recorded. I can go over to my tool window, and under here is sample 1. The other thing I can do is hold the sample button down until I'm done.
Bass drum.
And let go. And that will automatically stop the sampling. This only works when you're sampling in a device. It does not work from the tool window. All right, let's play this back and see if it actually works.
Bass, bass,
Let's raise the pitch back up.
bass, bass, bass,
We're only hearing the first part. Let me raise the length up.
bass drum, bass drum.
That might be a little long for a bass drum sample. Now over here I can select one of the samples that I've recorded and click Edit. And then I go into Edit Sampling mode. The only other way to edit a sample is from within Kong, within the NN Nano, there is an Edit Sample button. But other than that, you should use the tool window. So I click Edit, and I'm presented with either a mono or stereo waveform, and a navigator below. Works just like the one in the Reason rack. You can zoom in, you can drag the endpoints, and so forth. And you'll notice that it stripped off the beginning, the silence, and put a start marker where it thinks the waveform begins. I can, of course, change that. And there's also an end marker to the right of the waveform. Let's first give this sample a name. We'll just call it bass drum. And you should specify a root key. This is spoken, so it really doesn't matter so much, but it is important for other samples. And then I can drag the start and end pointers where I want them.
Bass drum.
Or I can select an area and just choose Set Sample Start End.
Bass, bass.
I can add looping. I select the area that I want to loop. It can be part or all of the waveform. Choose Set Loop. It's a good idea to check Crossfade Loop. That'll prevent some clicks when the loop repeats.
bass, drum, 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 drum.
I've got a little bit of the S in there from bass. Now I can go backwards and forwards.
Drum.
And then there are a variety of other things that we can do with the waveform. We can crop it. We can normalize it, which means boosting it up so that the highest peak is at 0.
Bass.
There's an undo button, but Command-Z works perfectly well. We can select an area to fade in or an area to fade out, and we can even reverse any part of the waveform.
Sip.
Okay, I'll undo all that. We've got our sample.
Bass.
All right, that sounds good. Let's now sample a snare drum. We're going to do the exact same thing. Hold down the sampling button.
Snare.
All right, and now we have a new sample showed up in our tool window. I'm going to edit that sample.
Snare.
Let's get a little more of the S in there.
Snare.
All right, let's name it. My root key is C3, that's fine for now, and we'll save it. Let's put in a pattern.
Bass.
And there you have it, my spoken word drum kit. Now there are a few more things you can do from the tool window. As I mentioned, all of the samples you're using, whether you sampled them or whether they come from refills, are shown there. And we can take any one and edit it, as I mentioned. We can delete it. We can duplicate it. And we can even export it. And when you export, you have a choice of cropping the sample to your markers or saving the complete sample. One last thing to mention, when you sample, you're sampling at the same sample rate that you specify under Preferences under the Audio tab. And that's an introduction to sampling in Reason.